The massive space station hung like a jewel against the darkness of space. Its crystalline structures sparkled with the light of nearby stars, dwarfing everything around it, everything except the enormous alien ships that surrounded it. These vessels belonged to the most powerful species in the Galactic Council, each one stretching for miles. Captain Tom Walker stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Thunder, watching as his small fleet of 5 vessels approached the station. The Thunder, at just under 1,000 feet long, looked like a toy compared to the alien ships. But Walker knew better than to judge by size alone. "They're hailing us," said Jack Brown, the communications officer. His console lit up with incoming transmissions. Walker straightened his uniform. On screen, the main display filled with the image of a tall, blue-skinned alien. Ambassador Kell of the Council stared down at them, his multiple eyes blinking in what seemed like amusement. "Ah, the humans arrive at last," Kell said, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. "We were expecting more." Behind him, several other council members could be seen snickering. One of them, a massive reptilian creature, actually pointed at the screen and laughed. Walker kept his face neutral. "We bring greetings from Earth. Our fleet is here to discuss membership in the Galactic Council." "Fleet?" Another council member stepped forward. "You call these tiny vessels a fleet? My personal yacht is larger than your entire squadron." More laughter followed. Walker felt his crew tensing around him, but they maintained their professional demeanor. Years of training had prepared them for first contact situations, though none had expected quite this level of mockery. Off to the side, Intelligence Officer Lisa White studied her readings carefully. Something about the council members' behavior seemed off. Their mockery felt forced, almost deliberate, as if they were trying too hard to appear superior. "You may dock at Bay 94, Kell said, waving his hand dismissively. "Though I'm not sure why you bothered coming. The Council only accepts advanced civilizations." As the transmission ended, Walker turned to his crew. "Stay sharp, everyone. Remember your training." The docking procedure went smoothly, despite the cramped space they were assigned. The Thunder's advanced maneuvering systems, hidden beneath its simple exterior, allowed it to slide into place with precision that made several alien observers do double takes. As Walker led his command team through the station's corridors, they passed numerous alien delegations. Most either laughed or shook their heads at the sight of the humans. Some even took pictures, as if documenting some primitive curiosity. "Captain," White whispered, falling into step beside him. "I've been monitoring their communications. There's something strange going on. They're too interested in our ship's capabilities." Walker nodded slightly. "Noticed that too. They're trying too hard to make us feel inferior. Keep gathering data, but be discreet." The council chamber was enormous, with seats rising hundreds of feet into the air. The human delegation was assigned to the lowest tier, typically reserved for primitive species seeking protection rather than membership. "Behold," Kell announced to the chamber, "the human delegation and their impressive fleet." The sarcasm in his voice was obvious, drawing more laughter from the assembled aliens. Walker took his place at the speaking platform, aware of thousands of eyes looking down at him. "Honorable Council, we come seeking." "Tell us," interrupted a large green-skinned delegate, "do your ships still use chemical propulsion, or have you managed to discover basic ion drives?" More laughter echoed through the chamber. Walker smiled slightly, thinking about the quantum drive hidden within the Thunder's hull. "We managed to get around," he said simply. "And weapons?" Another delegate called out. "Do you still throw rocks at each other?" White, sitting behind Walker, continued recording everything. The questions seemed specifically designed to make humans reveal their true capabilities. But why? As the mockery continued, Walker maintained his composure. Earth's intelligence had warned that first contact might be challenging, but this seemed like something more. Whether it was simple arrogance or something more sinister, he couldn't tell yet. One thing was certain: these aliens were in for a surprise if they ever discovered what human ships could really do. The meeting dragged on, filled with barely disguised insults and condescension. But beneath the surface, a game of cat and mouse was being played. The only question was, who was really the cat and who was the mouse? The human delegation had been on the council station for 3 days when the first reports started coming in. Walker sat in his temporary quarters, reviewing the data streams that Intelligence Officer White had collected. "Look at this, Captain," White said, pointing to her tablet. 3 different small civilizations have reported attacks on their outer colonies in the past week alone. The reports showed destroyed outposts and missing ships. Each incident had been dismissed by the Council as routine pirate activity, but the pattern was clear to trained eyes. "These aren't random attacks," Walker muttered, studying the star charts. "They're systematic. Someone's testing defenses." A knock on the door interrupted their discussion. Officer Brown entered, looking concerned. "Sir, you need to see this. Another council session is starting. They're mocking a small species that just lost 2 colonies." In the vast council chamber, a small, furry alien representative was practically begging for help. His species, the Tull, had just lost contact with their second mining colony in as many days. "Perhaps if you had better defenses," Ambassador Kell said with a smirk, "you wouldn't have these problems with pirates." Walker watched from his low-tier seat as the Tull representative's fur bristled with anger and fear. These weren't pirates. The attack patterns were coordinated. Our sensors detected ships larger than anything in known space. "Nonsense," another council member called out. "Our fleets are the largest in the galaxy. You simply need better equipment. Perhaps you could trade with the humans. Their tiny ships might be more your size." Laughter filled the chamber, but Walker wasn't listening anymore. He was studying the Tull representative's data pad from afar, using the Thunder's advanced optical sensors to zoom in on the display. The attack patterns looked familiar, eerily similar to something he'd seen in Earth's historical records. Back on the Thunder, Walker called an emergency meeting with his command staff. The ship's briefing room was small but efficient, just like everything else about Earth's vessels. "The attacks are following a classic probe and push pattern," Walker explained, showing the tactical display. "Whoever's doing this is measuring response times, testing defenses, and gathering intel on military capabilities. Just like the invasion of Earth in 2218, White added, "before we developed our current fleet design." Lieutenant Ray Parker, the weapons officer, spoke up. "Should we warn the Council?" "They won't listen," Brown said, shaking his head. "They're too busy laughing at everyone smaller than them." Walker stood up and walked to the viewport, watching the massive alien ships outside. "Start running silent scans of those Council vessels. I want to know their real capabilities, not just what they boast about." Over the next few days, the human crew quietly gathered data. The Council's mighty ships, for all their size, showed surprising vulnerabilities. Their point defense systems had wide gaps in coverage. Their reactor shielding was focused on impressive displays rather than efficiency, and their crews seemed more interested in ceremony than combat readiness. White brought more disturbing news one evening. "Captain, I've decoded some of their private communications. The Council isn't just dismissing these attacks. They're actively suppressing information about them. 3 more colonies went dark yesterday, but it never made it to the public announcements." Walker's face grew grim. "They're either hiding their weakness or they're in denial. Either way, it's going to get people killed." The Thunder's crew began quiet preparations. Weapon systems were checked and rechecked. Combat simulations ran in the background of every system. The ship's seemingly simple exterior remained unchanged, but inside, it was becoming a coiled spring. "Message from Earth Command. Sir," Brown reported one morning. "They've analyzed our data. They're concerned." Walker read the message carefully. Earth had seen these signs before, had learned from bitter experience what they meant. The question was, could they convince anyone to listen before it was too late? As he watched another council session dissolve into mockery of smaller species, Walker thought about Earth's history, about how humanity had learned the hard way that the greatest danger often comes from underestimating your opponent or overestimating yourself. The warning signs were there. The storm was coming. And the mighty council, for all its size and supposed power, was too blind to see it. The attack began during the council's weekly celebration feast. While the delegates drank and boasted, the massive unknown ships emerged from hyperspace. Dark, angular vessels that made even the council's largest ships look small. Multiple contacts. Brown's voice cut through the thunder's quiet bridge. I'm counting. 23 capital ships. At least 40 support vessels. Walker watched his tactical display as more enemy ships appeared. Their design was unlike anything in council records, all sharp edges and weapon ports, without a single decorative element. They're not responding to hails, Brown reported. Not even the council's emergency frequencies. The council's response was chaos. Their massive ships, so impressive while docked, struggled to form any kind of battle line. Years of peace had left them unprepared for real combat. Sir, White called out, I'm intercepting their communications. The council's ships, they can't get their weapons online fast enough. Their power systems are too complex, too focused on looking impressive rather than being efficient. The enemy ships opened fire. Their weapons cut through the council's celebrated shields like they were paper. 2 of the largest council vessels exploded before they could even bring their weapons to bear. Council Station is broadcasting a general distress call, Brown said. They're requesting immediate assistance from all Allied forces. Walker stood at his command station, watching the battle unfold. The Thunder's advanced sensors captured every detail of the slaughter. The Council's ships were big, beautiful, and utterly useless in real combat. Message from Earth Command, Captain, White reported. They're giving us authorization to engage, but only if directly attacked. We're to gather as much tactical data as possible. The battle continued to deteriorate. The Council's ships tried to fight back, but their weapon systems were too slow, their crews too inexperienced. The enemy vessels moved with practiced precision, targeting critical systems with surgical accuracy. They know exactly where to hit, Parker observed from his weapons station. They must have been studying council ships for months. Walker nodded. All those pirate attacks, they were mapping weaknesses, learning patterns, and the council was too proud to see it. The station itself came under attack next. The enemy ships ignored the smaller vessels, focusing their fire on the largest ships and the station's main defensive arrays. Their strategy was methodical, professional. Sir, White called out, I'm picking up some interesting readings from the enemy ships. Their power signatures, they're familiar. Walker moved to her station, studying the data. The energy patterns did look familiar, very similar to some classified files he'd seen about Earth's early encounters with advanced civilizations. Council Station is evacuating, Brown reported. They're asking all ships to assist with civilian withdrawal. Walker made his decision. Move us in closer to the station. We'll help with evacuations, but maintain our low profile for now. Let's see what these attackers do when they notice us. The Thunder glided forward, its simple exterior hiding its true capabilities. Several enemy ships passed nearby, but none gave the small human vessel more than a passing scan. They're making the same mistake the Council did, White said quietly. They think we're primitive because we're small. As they approached the station, Walker watched the enemy's attack pattern with growing certainty. He'd seen this before, in historical records of humanity's own space battles. This wasn't just an attack, it was a message. The enemy was demonstrating their superiority, humiliating the Council the same way the Council had humiliated smaller species. Sir, Parker spoke up, I've finished analyzing their weapon systems. They're good, but we could take them. Our point defense systems could handle their missile patterns, and their energy weapons aren't as advanced as they look. Walker nodded slowly. Send all data to Earth Command. Make sure they know exactly what we're dealing with. The battle continued around them as the Thunder helped evacuate civilians from the station. The Council's mighty fleet was in ruins, their beautiful ships reduced to drifting wreckage. Their arrogance had cost them dearly. Status report from Earth Command, Brown announced. The main fleet is mobilizing. They'll be here in 48 hours. Walker allowed himself a small smile. Soon, these attackers would learn the same lesson the Council had ignored. Size isn't everything in modern warfare, and humans are very, very good at fighting. Another Council battleship just went down, Brown reported, his voice tight with tension. That's the 5th one in the last hour. The scene outside the Thunder's viewports was one of complete devastation. The once proud Council fleet was scattered, their giant ships either destroyed or fleeing in disorder. The enemy vessels continued their methodical advance, moving like sharks through bloody water. "Captain," White called out, "Ambassador Kell is requesting emergency transport. His escape pod's engines are damaged." Walker looked at the tactical display. Kell's pod was drifting right in the path of an enemy destroyer. The same Kell who had mocked Earth's ships just days ago was now about to discover firsthand whether humans were as primitive as he thought. "Take us in," Walker ordered. "Combat systems online, but keep them hidden until my mark." The Thunder moved smoothly through the chaos of battle, its small size allowing it to weave between debris and energy blasts. The enemy destroyer loomed ahead, its weapons charging to finish off Kell's pod. "Now," Walker commanded. The Thunder's plain hull plates shifted, revealing state-of-the-art weapon ports. Before the enemy could react, the human ship launched a precise barrage of quantum torpedoes. The destroyer's shields flared and collapsed under the unexpected assault. "Enemy vessel is attempting to target us," Parker reported with a grim smile. "They're having trouble with their targeting systems. We're too small and fast for their heavy weapons." Walker watched as the destroyer tried to bring its main guns to bear, but the Thunder was already moving, dancing through space with an agility that made the larger ship's efforts look clumsy. Each movement was calculated, each evasion precise. "Picking up Kell's pod now," White announced. As the pod was drawn into their small cargo bay, the enemy destroyer finally managed to fire. The massive energy beam passed harmlessly through the space where the Thunder had been a second before. "Their targeting systems are designed for large vessels," Parker noted. "They never expected to fight anything our size." The Thunder spun on its axis, bringing its main weapons to bear again. This time, the shots targeted specific points on the destroyer's hull, points that White's analysis had identified as weak spots in their armor. The massive ship shuddered as precise strikes bypassed its remaining shields, cutting deep into its vital systems. Within moments, its engines went dark. "More enemy ships are noticing us," Brown warned. 3 destroyers breaking off from the main attack group. Walker smiled. "Good. Let's show them what a tiny human ship can really do." The Thunder accelerated, its quantum drive humming with power. The 3 enemy destroyers followed, their huge weapons charging, but they couldn't match the Thunder's maneuverability. The human ship led them on a complex dance through the debris field, forcing them to fire at where it had been rather than where it was. "Their formation is breaking up," White reported. "They're trying to surround us, but their turns are too wide." Walker watched as the enemy ships struggled to coordinate their attacks. Their size, which had seemed so impressive, was now a disadvantage. They couldn't react quickly enough to the Thunder's rapid changes in direction. "Target the lead ship's command center," Walker ordered. "Full spread, pattern Delta." The Thunder's weapons opened up again, this time revealing their full capability. Quantum torpedoes and energy beams struck with surgical precision, overwhelming the destroyer's defenses through sheer accuracy rather than power. The enemy ship's bridge erupted in a series of explosions. The remaining 2 destroyers hesitated, clearly surprised by the effectiveness of the attack. "Sir," Brown called out, "we're being hailed. It's the Council's emergency command center." The main screen showed a group of stunned Council members watching tactical displays of the battle. Ambassador Kell, who had just been brought to the bridge, stood with them. "How?" one of the council members asked. "How is this possible?" Walker looked at Kell, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "Size isn't everything, Ambassador. Quality beats quantity, especially in space combat. Now, shall we discuss how to save what's left of your fleet?" The remaining enemy destroyers were already pulling back, reassessing their approach to this unexpected threat. They had learned what the Council was just beginning to understand. Never judge an opponent by their size alone, especially if that opponent is human. "Emergency Council session in progress," Brown announced on the Thunder's bridge. The remaining council members had gathered in a secure bunker deep within what was left of their station. Captain Walker stood before the assembly, but this time, no one was laughing at the human commander. Behind him, tactical displays showed the ongoing battle and the approaching signatures of Earth's main battle fleet. "You're sure your fleet can help?" Ambassador Kell asked, his previous arrogance replaced by desperate hope. "Even with what you've shown us, you have so few ships." "Numbers can be deceiving," Walker replied. "Look." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Earth's fleet had arrived. 40 ships, each similar in size to the Thunder. To the council members, they still looked tiny compared to the enemy vessels. "Battle Group 7, ready for combat," came the transmission from the fleet commander. "Thunder, transmit your tactical data." The effect was immediate. Earth's ships moved into perfect formation, their coordinated movements telling Walker they were already implementing the combat data his crew had gathered. "All ships, engage at will," Walker ordered. "Show them what humanity can do." The human fleet accelerated as one, splitting into smaller groups with practiced precision. The enemy, who had been regrouping after the Thunder's surprise attack, found themselves facing an entirely new kind of threat. "Watch this," White said to Kell, who stood mesmerized by the tactical display. Earth's ships darted between the massive enemy vessels like wolves among elephants. Their smaller size made them nearly impossible targets for the enemy's heavy weapons, while their advanced targeting systems found weak points with unerring accuracy. 3 enemy capital ships disabled, Brown reported. "Our fleet is taking minimal damage. The enemy can't track us fast enough." The council members watched in amazement as ship after ship of their seemingly unstoppable enemy was systematically taken apart by the human fleet. Each human vessel moved with purpose, their attacks coordinated through advanced AI systems that the council had dismissed as primitive. "Sir," Parker called out, "enemy fleet is attempting to regroup. They're trying to form a defensive sphere." Walker nodded. "Just as we expected. Signal the fleet. Operation Thunderclap." The human ships suddenly scattered, appearing to flee in all directions. The enemy ships began to turn, trying to keep their weapons trained on the retreating vessels. "Now," Walker commanded. Every human ship spun simultaneously, their seemingly decorative hull plates sliding aside to reveal rows of quantum torpedo tubes. Before the enemy could react, a coordinated barrage struck their formation from all directions. "Multiple direct hits," White reported with satisfaction. Enemy shields failing across their battle line. The council chamber erupted in cheers as they watched the enemy fleet falter for the first time. Ships that had seemed invincible were now breaking apart under the precise attacks of the human vessels. "Incredible," Kell whispered. "All this time, we thought your ships were primitive because they were small. We never imagined. Size stopped mattering in space combat centuries ago," Walker explained. "Maneuverability, precision, and coordination are what win battles now. Your ships and theirs are designed to look impressive. Ours are designed to fight." The battle continued to turn. The enemy, faced with an opponent they couldn't effectively target or overwhelm, began to retreat. Their massive ships, once so threatening, now seemed clumsy and vulnerable. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation," Brown announced. "They're attempting to withdraw." Walker turned to the council members. "Now you have a choice. We can let them retreat, or we can press our advantage. But if we're going to work together, things need to change." The council members looked at each other, then at the tactical display showing their mighty fleet in ruins, while the small human ships continued their deadly dance. "We were fools," Kell admitted. "We let our pride blind us. Please, help us drive them back." Walker nodded and turned to his communications officer. "Signal the fleet. Tell them to pursue and engage. Let's show the galaxy what humanity can really do." As the human fleet moved to chase down the retreating enemy, the council members watched in silent reflection. They had learned a valuable lesson. True strength isn't measured by size, and humanity was far more advanced than anyone had guessed. "Enemy forces regrouping near the Centauri sector," Brown announced, his fingers flying over the communications console. "They're trying to establish a defensive line." The battle had been raging for 6 hours. Earth's fleet, now coordinating with the remaining council ships, had pushed the enemy back across 3 star systems. The Thunder led a formation of ships that included both human vessels and the few council ships that had learned to adapt to human tactics. "Look at that," White said, pointing to her tactical display. "The council ships are finally getting it. They're using their size as cover for our smaller vessels." Walker nodded with approval. A massive council battleship was acting as a shield, drawing enemy fire, while 3 human ships darted out from behind it to launch precision strikes. It was a tactic Earth had perfected years ago, using larger ships as mobile cover for smaller, more agile attack craft. "Enemy flagship detected," Parker reported from weapons. "It's bigger than anything we've seen so far." The tactical display showed the enemy vessel, a monster of a ship that dwarfed even the Council's largest vessels. Its hull bristled with weapon ports, all designed to engage large capital ships. "They still don't understand," Walker muttered. "Bigger isn't better. Send word to the fleet." Battle Plan Echo. The human ships began to move in complex patterns, each one following paths that looked random, but were actually carefully calculated. The enemy flagship tried to track them, its massive guns turning ponderously to follow the swift targets. "They're firing," Brown warned. Huge energy beams lashed out from the enemy flagship, but they were too slow. The human ships slipped between the shots, their smaller size allowing them to exploit gaps in the enemy's firing solutions that larger vessels could never use. "All ships target these coordinates," Walker ordered, marking specific points on the tactical display. The Thunder's advanced sensors had identified vulnerable spots in the enemy flagship's design, points where its massive size worked against it. 20 human ships struck simultaneously, their quantum torpedoes hitting the exact same spots from different angles. The enemy flagship's shields, designed to resist heavy weapons, couldn't adapt to so many small, precise strikes. "Their power grid is destabilizing," White reported with satisfaction. "They never thought they'd need to defend against anything our size. Their shield geometry is all wrong for it." The Council ships had learned quickly. Following the human example, they'd now coordinated their attacks instead of trying to overwhelm the enemy with size alone. Their remaining vessels targeted the weak points the humans had identified, adding their firepower to the precise strikes. "Enemy flagship's main reactor is going critical," Parker announced. "They're trying to eject their core, but their systems are too complex. They can't shut down fast enough." Walker watched as the massive ship began to break apart. Its size, once its greatest strength, now ensured its destruction. There were too many systems to shut down, too many power conduits to contain. "All ships, fall back to safe distance," Walker ordered. The human fleet retreated in perfect formation, still moving like a well-choreographed dance. Behind them, the enemy flagship exploded, the blast wave washing over their shields. "Remaining enemy ships are breaking formation," Brown reported. "They're running." The tactical display showed the enemy fleet scattering, their coordinated attack reduced to a panicked retreat. The combined human and council fleet pursued, but now with precision rather than brutality. "Signal from the council command," White announced. "They're requesting permission to adopt our combat protocols." Walker smiled. Finally, the council understood. It wasn't about having the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons. It was about efficiency, coordination, and the willingness to adapt. "Send them our basic tactical package," Walker ordered. "Let's show them how humanity really fights." As the battle concluded, the Thunder's crew watched their tactical display with pride. The mighty enemy fleet had been defeated not by superior size or overwhelming power, but by human ingenuity and precision. "You know what's funny?" Brown said quietly. "If they hadn't mocked our tiny fleet at the start, they might have actually studied our capabilities and been better prepared." Walker nodded. Their enemies, like the council before them, had made the mistake of judging by appearance alone. They never understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in the size of their ships, but in their ability to turn apparent weaknesses into decisive advantages. 2 weeks after the final battle, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The upper tiers, once reserved for the largest and most powerful species, now sat empty, their mighty ships destroyed or under repair. Instead, the council members gathered in the lower levels, eye to eye with the human delegation. Captain Walker, Ambassador Kell addressed the room, his tone respectful rather than condescending. "The council has reviewed the battle recordings. We owe humanity an apology." The chamber, once filled with mockery of smaller species, was silent. The surviving council members watched as Walker stood at the podium, where he had been ridiculed just weeks before. "The enemy has been driven back to their own space," Walker reported. "Their fleet is in ruins, and our combined forces guard the borders. But more importantly, we've all learned something valuable." The tactical displays showed the aftermath of the final battle. The massive enemy ships, now derelict, floated in space like monuments to arrogance. Around them, human vessels conducted patrol patterns, their small size no longer a source of amusement but of admiration. "We were fools," Kell admitted. "We thought size and power were all that mattered. We built bigger ships, more impressive weapons, grander displays of force. But when real combat came, you forgot the basics," Walker finished. "Speed, precision, coordination, the ability to adapt and overcome. These are what win battles, not the size of your ships." White stood next to Walker, presenting data from the battles. "Our analysis shows that the enemy made the same mistakes the council did. They built their forces to fight large battles against large ships. They never considered that smaller, more agile vessels could be a threat." The council members watched as simulations showed how the human ships had exploited gaps in enemy defenses that larger vessels could never have used. The precision strikes, the coordinated attacks, the brilliant tactics, all had been dismissed as primitive just weeks ago. "Humanity has taught us much," a council member said. "Not just about warfare, but about humility. We request that Earth take a permanent seat on the council, not in the lower tiers, but as equals." Walker looked around the chamber. The change was remarkable. Gone was the hierarchy based on size and spectacle. Now, species of all sizes sat together, learning from each other's strengths. "We accept," Walker said, "on one condition. The tier system ends. All species, regardless of size or appearance, get an equal voice." The council chamber erupted in approval. Smaller species, long dismissed and mocked, finally saw hope for real respect and recognition. "There's one more thing," White added, bringing up new tactical data. "Our long-range sensors show more enemy forces gathering. They'll be back, and they'll be better prepared." Instead of panic, the announcement was met with determination. Council members began discussing defense plans, now eagerly incorporating human tactics and strategies. "Let them come," Kell said firmly. "This time, we'll be ready. Not with size, but with skill. Not with power, but with precision." Walker watched as former enemies became allies, as pride gave way to wisdom. The Thunder's crew had done more than win a battle. They had changed the way an entire galaxy thought about warfare and strength. "Message from Earth Command," Brown reported from his position. "They're sending congratulations. and a reminder that we should stay humble ourselves. Walker smiled. That was humanity's real strength, not their technology or tactics, but their ability to learn from both victory and defeat. They had been the underdogs once, had learned the hard way that bigger wasn't always better. As the council session ended, Walker stood at the Thunder's viewport, watching ships of all sizes moving through space. Human vessels flew alongside council ships, each learning from the other, each respecting the other's strengths. Quite a change from our first arrival, White commented, joining him at the window. Walker nodded. They mocked our tiny fleet until they saw what human ships could really do. But the real victory isn't in proving them wrong. It's in teaching them to see things differently. Outside, a massive council ship and a small human vessel worked together to patrol the space lanes. Size no longer mattered. In the end, respect wasn't earned by how big you were, but by what you could do with what you had. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Never judge by appearances, especially when dealing with humans.